What is up, bros? Josh here, and today's video is all about the Tier 6 version, currently work in progress, of the Tier 5 Italian battleship, the Giulio Cesare. Now, it currently has a placeholder name of the Giugno Brutto. Throughout this entire video, just to clear up any confusion, I will still call it the Giulio Cesare or the Caesar. So, throughout this entire video, although it says something different, that's purely just a placeholder name, and I will be calling it the Caesar. So, this ship is being moved, and this is the first test version we've seen of this ship. It is getting moved to Tier 6. And now let's just kind of get the elephant out of the room. The Tier 5 Giulio Cesare was completely overpowered. It was an insanely strong ship, although extremely fun to play. It's amazing kind of having this power within your hands. You kind of feel like Thanos a bit, but it was too strong at Tier 5. No other battleship was really competitive compared to this thing. We even saw that in rank sprint, the Caesar just being extremely head and shoulders above everything else. And when you kind of get that, even when you played the ship, it didn't matter what tier you were or what tier you played against. Tier 5 in World of Warships is known for being an extremely aggressive tier when it comes to matchmaking, meaning you get bottom tiered a lot. But when you were top tier, boy, you just farmed everything. And when you were top tier, you farmed everything. When you're bottom tier, it didn't really matter. You were still very competitive, although you did have to play a little bit safer, still going against Tier 7s. Now we are seeing the version at Tier 6. So Tier 6 brings in Tier 6 matchmaking, which means instead of going against Tier 7s, you're going against Tier 7s more often, and now Tier 8s, that means Tier 8 CVs, and that brings a whole other set of issues. So throughout these videos, when I show a ship like this getting moved, I try to keep them relatively quick. This video will probably be longer than I want it to, but there's lots to go over because we haven't really seen a change to a ship like this has kind of happened. And so yes, I know this is kind of a touchy subject. I will go over what I think about the ship, what buffs I think the ship should get, how I think maybe World of Warships should have handled this, and then kind of another big topic is it's kind of a necessary evil going into this, and how, you know, it is a bit of a bummer. I can relate to everyone. I do have the ship itself, and getting it changed is a bit of a bummer. I can sense, and I can, even when I posted up my video the other day about some gameplay, there was obviously some negative stuff from everyone saying that they're really mad that the ship has changed. So this is the first time we've really ever seen a change like this, so this video might be a bit longer, and I want to kind of break down everything to give you guys as much information and hopefully some hope going into the ship into the future when it is potentially at Tier 6. But let's dive into the changes that it had from the Tier 5 version to the Tier 6, and one of the main ones is the armor. Actually, this is basically it. What ended up happening was the Tier 5 version had 19mm plating, which is fine for that tier. A lot of things aren't really going to punch you in the face as much as other tiers. And now at Tier 6, you have 25mm plating. Now, there probably is some AA difference, but man, the AA is just so extremely low, it seems. The AA rating's right there. Actually, I think the Caesar may even have a tad higher, or unless I just have some different things. I just have some extra buffs. But still, that's about it. It got an armor buff, and I think that's one of the biggest problems, and we'll dive into that in a little bit too, is it basically just got an armor buff, and then it's the same exact ship. Now, that seems fine and all because it's an extremely strong ship, but when you compare it to other Tier 6 battleships, you do run into some problems. I actually should have kept that clicked, but we're going to bounce over to the Tier 6, and we'll kind of show you a glaring issue, which I think is one of the biggest problems with this ship, and that is lack of range. So we're going to quickly go through these. I want to dive into some gameplay and show some other stuff, but 16.4 kilometers, and that is with no spotter plane. Oh, also one of the main things you can also get with this is you also get an extra slot. You get steering gears, propulsion, or damage control. You get that since that is the Tier 6 slot. But just going back to this, you have 16-kilometer range with a 30-second reload. That's all right if for a Tier 5 ship. But now this is at Tier 6. You really need some love, and the main reason is most, if not all, of the battleships at this tier have longer range, and most of them even have spotter plane. Now, I'm going to try to get through this. It may look a little clunky, but let's just kind of compare the Tier 6, and let's briefly go through all the battleships. The Fuso, known as being one of the strongest battleships at this tier, 21-kilometer range with a spotter plane. Mutsu, kind of the same thing. You have a 20.4-kilometer range with a spotter plane. New Mexico, there's kind of a pattern here. Almost 19 kilometers with the spotter plane. Arizona, same thing. 18.6 spotter plane. So you kind of get the pattern that I'm kind of telling you. This thing needs some love when it comes to range. Tier 5 is fine because the maps are smaller, but now you are getting into those mid to higher tier potential maps of the Tier 6 matchmaking where you run into it. Now, some comparable ranges you'll kind of get even is with the Prince Idol Frederick. But this thing has secondaries galore, AA galore. That has almost an 18-kilometer range with no spotter plane, but still you outfire this by a long ways. Warspite is another one that's pretty comparable, but 16.3, actually a shorter range, but you still do have spotter plane as an option. And you know, the Warspite's kind of its own little beast. It has much better armor. Its repair is better. You know, its Warspite's kind of a league of its own. Same thing with the Queen. And then you get to like kind of the Normandy. Even Normandy has more range, more of an agile kind of similar playstyle. And then the Dunkirk even has a longer range. Also, one of the main things to point out at this ship is the Dunkirk, known for being the smallest caliber shells at this tier. 330 millimeter shells with a 26-second reload. Although there are only 2 of them, the Giulio Cesare now at tier 6 has 320 millimeters with a longer reload at 30 seconds. So there's some love that this ship needs. It is now in a different league. Tier 5, you were just the king of all kings. Nothing really competed with you. And having shorter range and having this kind of style of ship was just a monster. Now at tier 6, you are in potentially the most competitive tier when it comes to battleships, and you also need to be able to at least kind of compete when it comes to being bottom tier. Now, the right thing to do, the right thing isn't to balance a ship around being bottom tier, but it is a necessary evil. So definitely seeing a massive problem with having one of the slower reloads at this tier with the smallest caliber shells. Yes, you are pumping out, we have 3 in the front, 2, so you're pumping out 10 shells, which is pretty solid at this tier, but for 30 seconds on the reload, either we're gonna need some love on range. My guess is into the high 17 kilometers, maybe 18 kilometers with a spotter plane. And you're going to need to maybe chunk down on the reload time a little bit, because if something else is pumping out that maybe 28-second reload. But the guns do need some love because you're going against more armored everything, and the maps are just getting bigger. Also, one of the main things you'll see in this game is the AA. So AA needs some love as well. Tier 5, this was fine because you're kind of just going against tier 4 planes, maybe tier 6 every once in a while. But now you're going against tier 6 more often, almost every game, and now you're going against tier 8. So the AA needs some love as well. Now, obviously, I've spent way too much time talking about this already, but that's just the stuff I wanted to tell you guys and kind of compare it with what we have with the current ship. So it is still work in progress, so all these stats are subject to change, and I think we will see some pretty aggressive changes when it comes to this ship. Right now, we're basically seeing the tier 5 ship just at tier 6 and seeing how it's competing, but this is in a different league now. Tier 5 is kind of that JV. Now we're in the tier 6, which is kind of that varsity style of there's a lot of ships to really compete against. You have some tried and true champions like the Fuso, the New Mexico, the Arizona. I mean, you have big bad bullies even like the West Virginia. Now, I don't think the West Virginia is extremely good, but those 406s do not care what you think about them because they will still smash your face in. So there's a lot of competition at this tier. In my opinion, probably the most competitive battleship tier of all World of Warships, just with choice and just with this. So going from what the tier 5 Giulio Cesare was to now seeing the tier 6 definitely isn't the same ship, but I do see some potential here for this play style of the kind of this agile, stealthy battleship. But right now, we do need some love. But let's bounce over to some gameplay. I'll show you guys how this actually plays. I actually didn't really mind it too much, but there were some glaring issues, which I kind of just gone over. Let's show you some gameplay. I'll show you some gameplay with a mid-tier game, as well as a little bit at high tiers. In all the games we played, I never really had a bottom tier where I went against a lot of battleships, but you will see what I'll be going against when playing against big caliber shells. Especially there's a game I go against West Virginia, then you can definitely see the armor is still going to get picked on by those big shells. So obviously, the more higher tiers you're gonna see, the bigger shells are gonna be more consistently fired at you. But let's dive into some gameplay. We'll show some gameplay from a couple games actually, and then I'll give my final thoughts on this ship going forward. So here we are in game with the tier 6 Caesar Sal, the Giulio Cesare, and this is a pretty normal game. I thought this was going to be a pretty normal matchmaking for tier 6, and one of the things that is kind of nice is the majority of the time. Now, I know a lot of people talk about tier 6 being a terrible tier and the always bottom tier. It really isn't true. I felt like this is a pretty normal matchmaking. We're middle, tier 7s, lots of tier 7s, a couple tier 6s, a couple tier 5s. I found this to be pretty normal when I've played all of my tier 6 games, especially through my other series. I'm going through tier 5. So one thing to see is the majority of ships you're going to be playing against are kind of ships you were already playing against in the past with the tier 5 version. Now you won't get the extremely low tier ones that we will all love, we all loved and will miss. We definitely didn't get those tiers anymore. Like going against the tier 4s, those don't really happen anymore. So you are going to kind of miss those, especially those low tier maps, which I personally love. But a lot of the ships you will see are ships you saw pretty regularly in the past. But going on this, you will get some good maps still. I really find like those low tier ones, and the guns to me felt relatively consistent. Now, throughout this entirety of the video, I am using AA mods. I'm using BFT. I was a little surprised I didn't hit any shells there. So one thing you could see is a tad more accurate shells by 7% with the aiming system mod. So I do tend to run, especially when I'm doing a test ship, I do tend to run a bit of a more AA build. Now remember, this captain is pretty much AA out of his mind. I have BFT, I have AFT, I have the AA flag, as well as I do have the AA module giving me more puffs of flak. So this is almost the highest this AA could actually go. And this is one of the things I really kind of fear with this ship, that it could be a potential problem with having its AA kind of so mediocre. So one of the things though is just keep in mind that the shells could be a tad more accurate or consistent, because I could have 7% more with having aiming system. But there is also kind of the old versus the new, the tier 6 versus the tier 5 version of the Caesar. But still, I felt like I could bounce a lot of shells. I do take some. Obviously, when you're broadside, the Fiji's going to murder anything. But I did still feel relatively tanky. But there were situations where, especially when you see something like the West Virginia, but the West Virginia will pick on anything. I did see situations that I did get wrecked a little bit. You don't really recognize that. It kind of is foreign to the Caesar, because at low tier, there really just isn't much that's going to hit you. Now you're going against much more consistent shells. I mean, even right there, we bounced a lot of shells, so as long as you still know how to use your armor. But the thing is, though, that you are going to be going against a more consistent, bigger caliber shell with stuff like, tier 7, tier 8 battleships being the regular. We are still getting good damage though, but again, we have kind of tier 5 metrics when it comes to a tier 6 ship, which is a tad of a problem. And this is a roller coaster. We're not actually gonna watch the whole video of this game because I don't want to relive what actually happened. But this video altogether is kind of a roller coaster of emotion. But as you can see right here, I'm kind of not even, I'm kind of waiting for my shot because I didn't want to take a broadside, because again, you are going to feel a tad more, I guess, mortal when it comes to this. Again, I'm not trying to, and this is what a lot of people are going to compare this ship to, is people are going to compare this to what the ship was in the past. And now, one thing that's actually pretty cool with the latest patch is the change to that, the hydroacoustic. So I knew that the Fiji was kind of close, so this was kind of nice. And one thing too is it feels like kind of a bummer. I felt kind of picked on a tad more. Okay, so one of the points I wanted to talk about was a lot of people are going to compare this to the tier 5 and say this isn't as good, this is a downgrade, this is it seems like the tier 5 was better. And the thing is, that's not a very fair comparison. Now, it's the comparison that a lot of people will make. I understand that because that's a ship that they had in the past, but the reason they're changing this is because the ship just, quite frankly, overperformed and it was too strong for the tier. So when it kind of came to the comparison, I feel like a lot of them are going to be a tad unfair. And what I mean by that is we're kind of comparing this ship to it's like comparing a tier 5 DD to the Kamikaze R or the Gremmy. It's just not really fair because those ships are so extremely strong and overpowered for their tier, same as the Caesar was overpowered for tier 5. I think one of the more fair things to compare this new ship to isn't the tier 5 version that it once was, it's just to the other tier 6 at this tier. And you're going to get into a lot of situations here where I wish I would have just been in a New Mexico or been in an Arizona or been in a Buso and in, stuff like that. That's the more fair comparison, because I felt like that's what you're going to have to really compare to when it comes to the ship. So going with comparing it to what the extremely overpowered ship was just isn't quite fair in my opinion. So I'm kind of going to leave those. in the past, but I know that's just bound to happen. I'm just giving my thoughts on why I don't think that's the best way of doing it. But still, you will get a, like I said, you would get a tad more consistent play, or consistent shells if I did take the aiming system. But again, I am taking the AA buff. I would highly recommend it because you're going to need it. But again, we're getting tier 5 metrics on this shell when it comes to, we are launching 10 shells, so that's fantastic. And even the Fiji, I felt like I was getting punished by cruisers. It felt so foreign to me. But we're going to plop it in there for the shells, and down he goes. But already 2 kills, 46k, and now we hear the victory is in the, victory is coming, or whatever you want to say, and now comes the downfall of my team as we slowly fall in to whatever ended up happening. So one thing I want you to do is, this is a double CV game. I want you to keep an idea of how many planes I shoot down throughout this entire game, because that is something I really want you guys to kind of focus on. But overall, I felt like it was still okay. I felt like it was still competitive. I was averaging, this is the biggest game we had, I was averaging in the 80 to 90k range still. I felt like that was pretty normal for a tier 6 battleship. But you get stuff like that. As you can see, I'm kind of shaking my mouse right there. Felt like a little bit of a bummer, but we were still getting big shell hits. One thing I definitely did notice, though, was I noticed that there was a severe lack in citadels on broadside battleships, and that's just what you're going to get with the smaller caliber shell. So to make up for that, I think you will kind of need a you know, you lack the punching power that basically any other tier 6 battleship would. You have the smallest caliber shells at this tier, by 10 millimeters outside of the Dunkirk. So you have these small calibers, so you do kind of, normally what ends up happening is you make up for that when it comes with when it comes to, you make up for that small caliber with faster reload, and this doesn't really have that. So that's just kind of a bit of a bummer. So but overall, I did kind of find this ship, one of the main things that people want to make the comparison to is, how does this ship do against tier 8s? So the ship is going to struggle against higher tier ships, it really is, but so does every other tier 6. It didn't feel like I was overly struggling whenever we went against tier 8 battleships or tier 8 ships in general. It felt pretty dang normal. It's not like it stands out as just a, man, this thing is extremely weak when it comes to tier 6s. One of the main things I say would probably be a bit of a standout is tier 8 planes. We didn't see a game though with tier 8 CVs yet, but basically every tier 6 battleship is going to have trouble against tier 8 planes. And one of the things though is this does have a smaller health pool, so that would be probably the biggest comparison, or that it felt like I would still pump out good damage. I remember we chunked I think an Amagi and a North Carolina, both for like 10k on a salvo, so it just felt normal. But remember, you aren't going to get those citadels on ships like that, or at least unless you're really close. It seemed like you're going to end up getting a tad more of the full pen damage. So I would say a bit more consistent with the smaller caliber. You'll get a bit more consistent damage, but you aren't going to get those Dev Strike level damage on battleships, at least. Obviously, we can get some massive salvos on CVs. But against tier 8 battleships, it didn't feel like anything that was astoundingly weak. It felt very normal when it came to being bottom tiered against these. I know this is something that a lot of people are going to be surprised by and mad by hearing, but overall it felt normal. But what we still can do though is pretty consistent damage against kind of broadside targets. But it just, I was really lacking the tier 6. I mean, I feel like especially going against New Yorks, I felt like if I was in a Fuso or in New Mexico, like that's still a 15k salvo. I'll take that any day of the week. But getting no black ribbons against battleships is a bit of a bummer when you're playing a battleship. So especially going against when you're going to have more armored battleships, especially angled battleships, it just needs to be a tad bit more competitive. Now, one of the things too, you're going to start seeing more and more of a, and if you're looking at the score, yes, we do end up losing this game, by the way, spoilers, but it felt similar when I was playing this ship, yet different at the same time. And it just, because you kind of feel like the ships you're playing against are normal. This is a normal kind of matchmaking, a normal kind of setup, and a normal kind of just to what's kind of to be expected. We still kind of bounce a lot of shells, but this isn't really anything I couldn't have done when it comes to any other tier 6 battleship. Honestly, I could have done this game with the options out here. Any kind of battleship would have done the same amount of damage, if not more. Would have been able to tank a tad more when it comes to other situations. So this though definitely did, when we start going against these bigger caliber shells against that West Virginia, is going to be what you can get on a more consistent basis, and no matter what they're kind of doing, it's just kind of wrecking your face, and you know, nothing you can really do about it. So you will definitely get that. Again, keep an eye out for how many planes we are shooting down. Now, one of the biggest comparisons was if I was in a Warspite or if I was in a New Mexico, I would have been absolutely shredding planes. It seemed like the majority of the planes we were actually getting were the ones that were kind of sitting in the sky or kind of floating up slowly. So that was kind of a bummer to kind of see. Is we just didn't really shoot out, and this is almost the highest AA this ship could actually be. Again, we had BFT, AFT, the flag, as well as the module for extra AA puffs. So if a CV really wants to kind of focus you down, there's not really much you can do about it. So again, at other tiers or other battleships at this tier, you are basically, it's kind of a GG. So this is nothing you can really do. And so that was kind of a bummer. It seemed like that. If I was in New Mexico, I'd just be shredding planes, and that was the biggest comparison there. Actually, the target I should have probably been picking here was the DD, but I figured that the battleship would be able to, or the CV would be able to get them down. So as you can see, even somebody in chat says, what do you think about it at tier 6? And I think it does need some love. Although, let's kind of be optimistic about this ship. We can doom and gloom all day, and I don't think the right thing to do with this ship is to balance it around what it was, because that's just going backwards. I do find this ship, if it does get some love, and again, my biggest change to the ship is that I would love to see that this ship get an increase to range. I think an increase to range would be extremely huge. I think somewhere into that 17 range, because what you're kind of getting is that Roma-esque ship of relatively stealthy, relatively agile, which I love. You can brawl. You have fast kind of cruiser level turret traverse. You do kind of get that, which is nice. So you are a fantastic brawler. And you kind of have those stealthiness, which a lot of battleships don't have. 11.9 kilometer range on its detection, and something you could honestly do is just increase the range, give it a spotter plane, and then increase the AA. And I think you really have, and maybe a little bit more life. 45,000 is pretty dang low when it comes to this, but you can't make it too strong compared to others by giving it like a big health pool, because if you do that, then it kind of shows, I think it'd be just too strong. But I think that and as you can see right here, we're already in a spot. I'm pretty far off to one side as we're slowly taking down this New York. So, but there's nothing else that's really in my range, and that's one thing I noticed a lot when it came to this ship, was just the lack of effective range kind of going into this. And like the West Virginia is at 15.9, that's right at the edge of my range. But honestly, I feel like if they increase the range, if they increase the AA, you get a ship that is on the higher tier of tier 6. I really do. I think you're on the higher tier. Now, do I think you're top tier? Do I think this is going to be better than the Fuso? Do I think this is going to be better than the West Virginia, or not the West Virginia, than the New Mexico, the Warspite? Do I think it's going to be the new top tier battleship? No, I do not. I think it will be in the upper part of tier 6, but I do not think it will be one of the top tier battleships. I just think those are too good, too consistent, and but I do feel like this will have a place in tier 6. I really do. I like the kind of quick, fast, agile ships. Like right here, every other ship, this is a perfect example of what was going on, is every other ship at this tier would be able to fire at that destroyer. Every other ship would have either a spotter plane or just be within range, and I do not. So I felt basically worthless the rest of this game, and I think we end up getting one more kill on this, so the rest of this just ends up being me not really being able to get in range of anything. So we'll kind of just let it go. We do, again, we have a 900 point. We do end up losing this game, so that's a bit of a bummer. So it's a kind of, but it's just me not being within range of anything the rest of this game besides a couple ships. So we'll just kind of skip the rest of this, but we do end up with a Kraken, but pretty much everything dies, and you just see me get picked off by CVs the rest of the game. It's not very exciting to watch, but there's some goods and there's some bad about this ship, and I really kind of expect things to get changed pretty aggressively. So there's a couple main points to really think about this when going forward with this ship. Is one, I want this to be a viable tier 6. It's joining potentially the most competitive tier in World of Warships. It really is. There's so many good tier 6 battleships. It's such a good tier in this game. It's so fun. It's very affordable too for a lot of people who are looking for good ships. But I do feel like this ship needs some love. It is a tier 5 ship into a tier 6 matchmaking. So although it still can compete, there are glaring issues with this ship actually being finalized. So those are things that I think Wargaming really needs to look at. But I do feel like this is going to end up being a pretty solid ship. I feel like this is going to be a ship that people will actually still enjoy playing. Will it be as kind of an easy cakewalk as it was in the past? Definitely not. But again, my biggest changes that I think will come to this ship are, one, range. It needs ranged love. It really does. And two, it needs AA love. I think really if they do that, maybe give about 5k more life, give it some more range, give it some AA buffs, give it a spotter plane, something like that. We really have a usable tier 6 here, and I think it will actually be pretty solid. Now, will it be the top tier? Will it be better than the Fuso? Will it be better than these tried and true tier 6 battleships? No, it really won't. But in the end, I do think that we will get a ship that will be kind of usable, and I think will actually be relatively enjoyable to play. But anyways, guys, want to give you a good preview. I know this video is going to be way longer than what it should be, and honestly, it's something that I think we'll kind of need to see how it goes. I do not think this is the first. I don't think this is gonna be the final version of the ship at all. I just think it does need some tweaks, and I'm really excited to see what the ship ends up looking like. Because if it is kind of close to this, I think we're gonna be pretty dang good. But we did end up losing that game, 142k. Again, only shot down 4 planes, and remember at the end of that game, I was getting pelted with planes. So we only shot down 4. Again, one of the glaring issues. Almost 100 target hits. Pretty dang good, but it was a longer game. We did get a 5th kill on one of the battleships. We needed it, but we still ended up losing that game. Feels bad because when the battleships focused me, they just had more range than me. I couldn't really do anything, and we had to try to get the kill, so we ended up dying throughout. But we 3 secondary hits to 5 kills, 140k, and but it's still I still like how the ship kind of feels. It's agile. It's it's quick, it's sexy looking, but I just think it does need some love in the end. But anyways, guys, this is my preview for the currently work in progress tier 6 Giulio Cesare, and I just want to give you guys my thoughts on the ship and what I think will end up happening in the future. But anyways, guys, that's it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Remember to like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.